The diner was closing for the night, the kind of slow Tuesday that made the air smell like burnt coffee and bleach. Neon lights flickered through the window blinds, painting stripes across the empty booths. Nora Lane was down to her last table, wiping ketchup stains that never seemed to come off. Her feet ached, her back was tight, and the tip jar barely held $12. She'd been working doubles all week, trying to keep her mom's hospital bills from turning into a lawsuit. "Clock out, kid," said Tony, the night manager, tossing her a dish rag. "No point in polishing ghosts." Yeah, Nora muttered. She bent to grab a dropped napkin near booth 9 when her rag brushed against something hard wedged beneath the seat. At first she thought it was a phone, but when she pulled it free, it wasn't a phone. It was an old leather wallet, cracked and dusty, the kind that had seen decades of pockets. She glanced around. Everyone was gone. The clock over the register blinked 12:07 a.m. "Tony," she called, "someone left this." He didn't look up from the register. "Leave it on the counter. I'll toss it in lost and found." But something stopped her. The wallet was heavy, real leather, real age. Her thumb brushed over a name embossed faintly on the inside flap. Daniel Mercer. The name made her chest tighten. She didn't know why. She flipped it open. Inside were 3 things: a few faded bills, a worn driver's license that looked like it belonged to another century, and a photograph tucked behind the plastic ID window. The photo was soft from handling, the colors bleached by time. It showed a young woman sitting in a field, holding a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. The woman's face was unmistakable. It was her mother. Nora's hand began to shake. The baby wasn't just any baby. It was her. The tiny birthmark under the chin. The same little half-smile her mom always joked she'd been born with. She'd seen that exact picture once, years ago, framed on their dresser. Her mom had said the original was lost in a move. But how could it be in a stranger's wallet? She stared at the name again, Daniel Mercer, and whispered it out loud, testing the sound. It didn't belong to any friend of her mother's. It felt unfamiliar, yet hauntingly close. Her breath came short. She turned the license over. The address was from 2 towns over. The issue date, 1999. She was born in 2000. The realization crawled up her spine. The timing, the photo, her mother's hidden sadness whenever she mentioned Nora's father. All the missing pieces rearranged themselves into something terrifying. Her hands trembled as she slid the photo back inside and closed the wallet. She wanted to believe it was a coincidence, but every instinct screamed otherwise. Tony called from the kitchen. "You locking up or what?" Nora shoved the wallet into her apron. "I'll handle it," she said, her voice smaller than she wanted it to be. The rain started just as she stepped outside, fat, cold drops soaking through her thin jacket. The streetlights blurred into halos. She walked home fast, the wallet clutched against her chest like it might disappear. By the time she reached her apartment, her fingers were numb. Her mother's light was still on. Nora hesitated at the door, her pulse drumming in her ears. She wanted to knock, to ask, "Who is Daniel Mercer? Why do you look so scared whenever I ask about Dad?" But she didn't. She slipped inside quietly, her mother asleep on the couch, hospital papers scattered like fallen leaves around her. Nora stood there, drenched, staring down at the woman who had raised her alone. She looked back at the wallet in her hand and whispered to herself, "Mum's not gonna tell me the truth." But he might. Morning sunlight crept through the blinds, landing on the stack of unopened medical bills on the kitchen counter. Nora sat at the table, the old wallet lying between her hands like a bomb she was afraid to touch. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that photo, her mom smiling, holding her as a baby, and the name, Daniel Mercer. Her mother's cough broke the silence. Ruth shuffled into the kitchen wearing her threadbare robe, her grey-streaked hair pulled into a messy bun. "You're up early," Ruth said, reaching for the coffee pot. "You working breakfast shift again?" Nora nodded automatically. Her voice didn't want to come out. She stared at the wallet, her pulse thudding in her ears. "Mum," she said finally, her tone too quiet to sound casual. "Can I ask you something?" Ruth poured the coffee. "As long as it's not about the rent." "It's not." Nora slid the wallet across the table. It landed with a soft thump. "I found this last night. At the diner." Ruth looked down, ready to brush it off until her fingers touched the leather, her face drained of color. Where did you get this?" she whispered. "I told you. Booth 9. Someone must have left it." Ruth's hands trembled as she flipped it open. When her eyes fell on the photo, she gasped, so softly it was almost a whimper. "No." Her voice cracked. "Oh God, no." "Mom, what is it?" Ruth shut the wallet fast, as if the picture could bite. "You shouldn't have this, Nora. You don't understand." "Then make me understand." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "He's gone. He's been gone a long time. Forget it." "You mean Daniel Mercer?" The sound of the name made Ruth flinch. The coffee mug slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. Nora jumped up. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" Ruth pressed a shaking hand to her chest. "You need to promise me something, baby. Don't go looking for him. That man doesn't exist anymore." "Doesn't exist?" Nora's voice rose. "Mom, there's a picture of you in his wallet. You're holding me. Why would a stranger carry that?" Ruth backed away, clutching the counter for balance. "Because he's not a stranger," she whispered. The words hit like a slap. Nora's throat went dry. "You told me my father left before I was born." "He did," Ruth said, her tone brittle. "Just not the way you think." "Then how?" Ruth looked at her daughter, really looked, and for a moment the tough, exhausted woman seemed to collapse under the weight of memory. "He didn't leave you, Nora. He left us, and I made sure he never came back." The silence that followed was suffocating. Nora could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the cheap wall clock. She took a step forward. "Why would you do that?" Tears slid down Ruth's cheeks. "Because I had to protect you." "From what?" Ruth's lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes flicked toward the wallet, then away, like it was poison. "Some truths don't make life better," she said finally. "They only burn what's left of it." Nora felt her anger dissolve into confusion, then something colder. Determination. She picked up the wallet, slipped it into her bag, and looked at her mother one last time. "You've spent your whole life protecting me from the past. Maybe it's time I meet it myself." Ruth's voice broke as she said, "Please, Nora, let the dead stay buried." But Nora was already walking toward the door, because for the first time in her life, she knew the one question she'd never dared to ask might finally have an answer. The bus rattled down Main Street, its brakes squealing at every light. Nora sat near the back, her hands gripping the old wallet so tightly her knuckles were white. Rain streaked across the windows, blurring the lights of Ridgefield, a town she'd only ever seen on TV. The license inside said Daniel Mercer, 14 Westwood Avenue, Ridgefield Heights. That wasn't far. An hour's ride, maybe less. She stared at the address again. The name looked too clean, too official to belong to the ghost her mother described. "Don't go looking for him," Ruth had said. But Ruth had also said he didn't exist. One of those had to be a lie. Her phone buzzed. A text from her best friend, Mia. "You bailed on lunch again?" Nora typed back. Something came up. Big. Then she deleted it. No one would believe her anyway. By the time she reached the diner for her evening shift, the rain had turned into mist. The neon open 24 hours sign buzzed overhead, flickering like it might give up any minute. Tony handed her an apron without looking up. "You're on window tables tonight, and try not to look like someone died, yeah?" "Sure," she muttered, tying the apron. The smell of bacon grease and burnt toast clung to everything. It was comforting in its own tired way, until Nora saw the news playing on the mounted TV behind the counter. The anchor's voice cut through the chatter. Daniel Mercer, founder of Mercer Holdings, appeared at today's charity gala in Ridgefield. Her head snapped up. The camera showed him, grey-haired, tailored suit, shaking hands with a line of executives. He didn't look like a ghost. He looked alive, powerful, untouchable. She whispered his name under her breath, barely audible. Daniel Mercer. Who? Tony asked. No one, she said quickly. But it wasn't no one. It was the man whose name was carved into the leather, sitting in her bag. Hours passed in a blur of orders and empty smiles. By the time the last table cleared out, it was almost midnight. She sat at the counter, the rain tapping against the windows again. Tony counted the register, humming off-key. You ever think people can live 2 lives at once? She asked suddenly. Tony raised an eyebrow. You mean like a day job and a side hustle? No, like 2 completely different lives, one for the world and one for the people they left behind. He chuckled. You've been reading too much poetry, kid. Yeah, she said softly. Maybe. When the diner finally closed, she walked the 5 blocks to her apartment. The hallway smelled like damp carpet and cigarette smoke. Her mom's door was closed. Nora stood there for a long moment, her hand on the knob, listening. The soft hum of the oxygen machine leaked through the thin wall. She went to her room instead, turned on the lamp, and laid everything out on the bed. The wallet, the photo, the driver's license. Her eyes caught something she hadn't noticed before. A tiny tear in the photo's corner, just big enough to reveal another layer beneath. She peeled it back carefully. There was a message written in neat handwriting behind it. For my girls, Ruth and Nora, my heart will find its way home. Her breath caught. Her father hadn't forgotten them. He'd left a promise. Nora stared at the words until the letters blurred through her tears. The man her mother had run from still remembered them, still carried them. She wiped her eyes and whispered, If he remembers, then he deserves to see me. And as thunder rolled outside, Nora decided, tomorrow, she would go to Ridgefield Heights. The next morning felt heavier than usual, like the air itself was holding its breath. Nora threw on her jacket, grabbed her bag, and slipped out before her mother woke. The sky was a dull grey, the kind that turned the world into a faded photograph. She caught the early bus to Ridgefield Heights, the kind with cracked seats and a driver who hummed country songs under his breath. Her reflection in the window looked tired. Pale skin, dark circles, eyes that hadn't known sleep in 2 days. She rehearsed what she might say if she saw him. Hi, I think you're my father. Too weird. You knew my mom, Ruth Lane? Too vague. Every version sounded like the beginning of a bad soap opera. When the bus rolled into Ridgefield, the scenery changed fast. The cracked sidewalks of her neighborhood turned into clean streets lined with manicured hedges and quiet wealth. She stepped off the bus and felt completely out of place, like a stain on white silk. The address from the wallet was easy to find. Too. Westwood Avenue looked like something from a movie. Big houses, stone fences, cars that cost more than her mother's hospital bills combined. Number 14 sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, a 2-story colonial wrapped in ivy. Nora stood at the gate, clutching the wallet in her hand. The mailbox read, The Mercer Residence. Her heart pounded so loudly, she thought the neighbors could hear it. She didn't move. Not for a long time. Then a black SUV pulled into the driveway. A man in a sharp suit stepped out, phone to his ear. His voice crisp and confident. Even from a distance, she recognized him from the news segment. Daniel Mercer. For a second, the world seemed to narrow to a single point. There he was. The man her mother refused to talk about. The man who had carried their photo for decades. Her throat tightened. She wanted to run, but her feet stayed planted. He walked past the gate without noticing her, still talking into his phone. His voice was deep, smooth, the kind of tone used to closing deals. Nora's voice came out before she could stop it. "Mr. Mercer." He turned. Just one word, and the world shifted. His eyes landed on her, confused, polite, distant. "Yes?" She swallowed hard. I think you dropped this a while ago." She held out the wallet, her hand trembling. He frowned, stepping closer. "Where did you get that?" "I found it, at a diner in Brookville." He took the wallet, his expression unreadable. "Strange. I haven't been to Brookville in 20 years. She forced a smile. "Guess it traveled." Daniel looked down at the leather, his thumb tracing the edge. "This is impossible," he murmured. "I lost one just like it when I was younger." "Maybe it found its way back," she said softly. His gaze lifted to her again, and for a moment something flickered. Confusion, recognition, maybe both. "What did you say your name was?" She hesitated. The truth hovered on her tongue. "Nora," she said finally. "Nora Lane." He blinked, the name clearly stirring something in him. "Lane," he repeated under his breath. Then, just as quickly, he straightened, slipping the wallet into his jacket pocket. "Thank you, Miss Lane. I appreciate your honesty." And just like that, he turned and walked inside. The gate clicked shut behind him, leaving Nora alone on the sidewalk, her pulse still racing. She didn't know whether to feel relief or heartbreak. He hadn't recognized her. Or maybe he had, and chose not to. She looked back at the house, the curtains already drawn. Then she noticed a second silhouette in an upstairs window, a young man watching her. His expression wasn't confusion, it was shock. Nora stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring up at the second-floor window. The figure was still there. Tall, broad-shouldered, a man around her age. For a few seconds, they just looked at each other through the glass, neither moving. Then the curtain snapped shut. Her pulse raced. Whoever he was, he'd seen her. And judging by his expression, he hadn't just been curious. He'd looked stunned. She turned away quickly, walking down the quiet street before someone called security. She had no plan now, no idea what came next. She'd met him, the man from the photo, and he'd treated her like a stranger handing back a lost umbrella. The bus stop bench was wet from the morning drizzle. Nora sat anyway, clutching her bag to her chest. She replayed his face in her mind. How calm he looked, how careful. Maybe her mother was right. Maybe he didn't want to be found. Her phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. "Don't leave Ridgefield. Meet me at the park across from Westwood at 5 o'clock." She stared at the screen. No name, no signature. Just that. She typed back, "Who is this?" No response. By 5 o'clock, the clouds had cleared, leaving the sky a pale blue. The park across from Westwood Avenue was small but immaculate. Trimmed hedges, marble benches, and a fountain in the center that caught the last light of day. Nora sat on one of the benches, her hands stuffed into her pockets, her stomach in knots. A voice behind her said, "You came." She turned. It was the man from the window. He looked younger up close, late 20s, maybe early 30s, wearing jeans and a dark sweater. His hair was the same chestnut brown as hers. "You texted me?" she asked. He nodded. "Name's Ethan Mercer, Daniel Mercer's son." Her breath hitched. "You're his—" "Yeah," he said, sitting beside her. "You showed up at our gate today. My dad mentioned it." Nora's throat tightened. "Did he say anything?" Ethan gave a humorless laugh. "He said a young woman returned his wallet, that's it. No details, which is weird, because my dad never loses anything. And he sure as hell doesn't look that shaken when a stranger hands him a piece of leather." He turned to face her fully. "Who are you, really?" She hesitated. This was it, the line between staying invisible and blowing everything open. "My name's Nora Lane. My mom's name is Ruth." Something flickered in his eyes. "Ruth Lane? That name sounds—" He trailed off. "You're from Brookville?" She nodded. Yeah. Ethan exhaled slowly. My dad used to disappear there sometimes when I was a kid. Said it was for work, but my mom hated it. Fights, slammed doors, the whole show. He rubbed the back of his neck. You think he knew your mom? I don't think, Nora said quietly. I know. She pulled the old photo from her bag and handed it to him. Ethan looked down, and the color drained from his face. That's your mom? Yes. He swallowed hard, his gaze flicking between the photo and Nora's face. Jesus, you... He broke off, shaking his head. You look like him. The words landed like a hammer. Ethan stood, pacing a few steps. If this is true, if my dad's been hiding something like this for decades, I don't want money, Nora said quickly. I just want the truth. He looked at her for a long moment, jaw tight. Then he said, Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. He's hosting a private dinner at the Ridgeview Hotel. I can get you in. Her heart lurched. Why would you do that? Because, Ethan said, slipping his hands into his pockets, I think we both deserve to know who our father really is. And as he walked away, Nora realized the next time she saw Daniel Mercer, the truth might destroy all three of them. The Ridgeview Hotel shimmered like a glass palace against the night sky. Cars lined up at the entrance, headlights flashing across the marble steps. Nora had never been anywhere like this. Her hands shook as she adjusted the borrowed black dress Mia had lent her. The tag still itched at her neck, a small reminder she didn't belong here. Ethan's text had been brief. Meet me by the service entrance. Don't draw attention. She found him waiting by the loading dock, dressed in a dark suit that made him look every inch the polished air. You're late, he said, glancing at his watch. I almost didn't come, she admitted. Yeah, I figured, but you did. His tone softened. You sure you're ready for this? No, she said honestly, but I need to be. He nodded once and handed her a white apron. You're not a guest tonight. You're staff. It's the only way to get you in without questions. She stared at it. You want me to pretend to be a waitress? Ethan gave a small, ironic smile. Pretend? Nora smirked despite herself. Touché. They slipped through the back corridors into the grand ballroom. The place was a dream of crystal chandeliers and gold trim, filled with people who looked like they'd been born in tuxedos. Waiters moved like shadows, silent and efficient. Nora joined them, keeping her head down, her tray steady. Then she saw him. Daniel Mercer stood near the head table, laughing politely with a senator and 2 executives. His posture was perfect, his smile practiced. The man from the photograph had aged into power, grey at the temples, eyes sharp as glass. Her chest tightened. That was her father. Ethan whispered from behind her. He doesn't know you're here. Yet. What happens when he does? We find out what he's hiding. The dinner began. A string quartet played something soft and expensive. Nora floated through the room, refilling wine glasses, catching fragments of conversation about stocks, mergers, charity. None of it sounded real. At one point, Daniel turned slightly, and his gaze swept across the room, then stopped. For one frozen second, their eyes met. It was like touching a live wire. Recognition flared in his face, quickly smothered by confusion, then fear. He blinked, and just like that, the mask returned. Nora's hand trembled, nearly spilling a glass of red wine. She turned away, pretending to adjust a napkin. Ethan leaned close. He saw you. I know, she whispered. What do I do? Stay calm. Let him come to you. But Daniel didn't approach. Instead, he excused himself from his table and slipped through a side door. Nora hesitated, then followed. She found him alone in a hallway lined with mirrors. His reflection stared back at her from every angle, 100 versions of the same man. He turned at the sound of her footsteps. Who are you? He demanded, his voice low but sharp. You already know, she said quietly. He studied her face, and something inside him seemed to break. "Ruth," he whispered, as if saying the name summoned a ghost. "You look just like her." "She's alive," Nora said, her voice trembling, "and she told me to stay away from you." Daniel closed his eyes, pained. "She was right. Why? Because you left us, or because you were forced to?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't understand what that woman ran from." "Then make me understand." Before he could answer, footsteps echoed from the corridor. Ethan's voice calling, "Dad?" Daniel froze. The mask came back. "You need to go, now." Nora's throat tightened. "I'm not leaving." But his tone turned to steel. "If you care about your mother, you will." And in that moment, Nora realized, whatever truth Daniel Mercer was hiding, it was big enough to scare even him. Nora didn't move. The hallway felt too small, the air too thin. Daniel stood there, caught between anger and fear, his eyes darting towards the sound of approaching footsteps. Ethan was coming closer. "You're scared," Nora said softly. "Why? What could be worse than abandoning your own family?" His jaw tightened. "You have no idea what I lost back then." "Then tell me," she demanded. "Tell me what happened to you and my mother. Tell me why she's been terrified of your name for 20 years. Daniel's hand twitched, as if he wanted to reach for her, but couldn't. "Ruth didn't run from me. She ran because of me." Before she could ask more, Ethan appeared at the end of the hall. "Dad, what's going on?" His eyes flicked between them. "Why are you yelling at her?" Daniel straightened, his expression shuttered. "It's nothing. She's leaving." Ethan looked from his father to Nora. "Leaving? She's not staff, is she? I saw your face when you looked at her. You know her." "Ethan, no, I want the truth," Ethan cut in. "You said you didn't recognize her. But that's a lie." Nora met Ethan's eyes, her voice trembling but steady. "He knows me. I'm his daughter." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Ethan blinked, stunned. "What are you talking about?" Daniel's voice dropped to a warning growl. "Nora." But she didn't stop. "You had an affair with my mom, Ruth Lane. You left her when she was pregnant. I found your wallet, the one with our photo in it." Ethan took a step back, his face draining of color. "You're saying she's my sister?" Daniel closed his eyes, exhaling sharply. "It's not that simple." "Then make it simple," Nora shot back. "Because right now, all I see is a man who built an empire on lies." The tension cracked like glass. Ethan's voice shook. "You told me you were faithful to Mom, that you were loyal to this family." Daniel turned to his son, his tone pleading now. "I was. I tried to be. But Ruth, she wasn't supposed to get hurt." "You mean Mom wasn't supposed to find out?" Ethan snapped. "You cheated, Dad. You had another family." People had begun peering from the ballroom doorway, curious about the noise. Daniel's shoulders stiffened. His voice dropped to a low, dangerous whisper. "Not here. Both of you. Follow me." He led them into a side room lined with old portraits. The noise of the dinner faded behind the thick door. Daniel faced them, the weight of years in his eyes. "I met Ruth before I married your mother," he said finally. "She worked at a real estate firm I acquired. Smart, driven, kind. We were young. We fell in love. Then my father found out." Ethan frowned. "Grandfather?" Daniel nodded. "He was ruthless. He thought Ruth wasn't suitable. He threatened her, paid her to disappear. When she refused, he made sure she had no choice." Nora felt cold all over. "You let him do that?" "I tried to stop him," Daniel said quietly. "But I was weak, and by the time I went back for her, she was gone." Nora's voice cracked. "So you just moved on? Married someone else and pretended we didn't exist?" His eyes glistened. "I never stopped looking for you. I carried that photo for 20 years. The room fell silent. Ethan stared at him, disgusted. "You spent my whole life preaching integrity. Turns out you're just another coward in a suit." He turned and stormed out. Daniel looked at Nora, broken. "I know you hate me. But please, don't hate him." Nora's hands shook. "You don't get to ask me for anything." And as she left the room, Daniel's empire of silence finally began to crumble around him. By the time Nora got home, the city had gone to sleep. Streetlights cast long, lonely shadows over the cracked pavement. She walked fast, her mind spinning like a wheel she couldn't stop. The night at Ridgeview had shattered something inside her. Every memory, every question she'd buried had cracked open. Her apartment was dark except for the glow of the television. Her mother was awake, sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. The oxygen machine hummed softly beside her. "You went looking for him, didn't you?" Ruth said, without turning her head. Her voice was quiet, but sharp enough to cut. Nora froze in the doorway. "You knew I would." "I told you not to." "Yeah, well, I did it anyway." Ruth finally looked at her, eyes tired and glassy. "What did he say?" Nora's voice trembled. "That you ran because his father threatened you, that he tried to find us." Ruth's expression twisted. "He told you that?" She gave a bitter laugh. "Of course he did. That's his version. The Mercer family always had one." "Then tell me yours," Nora said, stepping closer. "Tell me what really happened." Ruth stared at the flickering TV for a long moment before speaking. "You want the truth, honey? Fine. You deserve it. I didn't run because of his father. I ran because of him." Nora blinked. "What?" "He was never the man you think he was. Daniel Mercer was charming, yes, but underneath that charm, he was cold, controlling. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought he'd be happy. Instead, he told me it would ruin everything. He wanted me to end it." Nora's stomach dropped. He told you to..." Ruth nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I refused, so he promised to take care of it himself. I believed him, stupidly. But when I found out what 'take care of it' really meant, I packed a bag and ran in the middle of the night." The air felt heavy, like all the oxygen had been pulled out of the room. Nora sank into the armchair across from her. "Why didn't you ever tell me this?" "Because I didn't want you growing up hating half of yourself," Ruth said softly. "I wanted you to believe your father was someone worth missing." Nora shook her head, tears spilling over. "He said he looked for us. He said he carried our photo." Ruth gave a tired smile. "He probably did. Guilt makes people sentimental." For a while, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the oxygen machine and the static buzz from the TV. Finally, Nora whispered, "You could have told me the truth. All these years, I thought he left you. I thought maybe you weren't enough." Ruth's face crumpled. "Baby, you were the only thing that was ever enough." Nora wiped her eyes. "Then why does it feel like I still don't know who I am?" Ruth reached out, her hand trembling as she brushed a strand of hair from Nora's face. "Because you've been living in the shadow of a lie, sweetheart. It's time to step out of it." Nora nodded, her voice barely audible. "I think I already did." Ruth's breathing grew ragged, exhaustion washing over her. "Promise me something," she said weakly. "Don't let that man take your peace. No matter what he says next, don't let him rewrite what really happened." "I promise," Nora whispered. Her mother's eyes fluttered shut, her chest rising and falling in slow, shallow breaths. Nora sat beside her for hours, watching the woman who had given up everything just to keep her safe. And when the first light of morning crept through the window, Nora knew she couldn't walk away now. Not when the truth was only half told. 2 days passed like a fever dream. Ruth was resting more, speaking less. Nora called off work, spending her hours between the kitchen table and her mother's bedside, trying to piece together a truth that didn't want to stay still. One moment, she believed Daniel's story. The threats, the lost love, the regret. The next, her mother's version drowned it out. Control, manipulation, fear. Both stories couldn't be true, but both of them felt true. On the third morning, while Nora reheated cold coffee, the TV caught her attention. A news anchor's voice filled the small apartment. Business mogul Daniel Mercer has announced a new philanthropic initiative, a youth housing foundation, named after his late wife, Caroline Mercer. Nora froze, mug halfway to her lips. The screen showed Daniel at a press conference, standing behind a podium, smiling like the world had forgiven him. Next to him was a younger man, Ethan. But something in the background made her lean closer. Behind the podium was a large poster featuring the foundation's logo, and below it, a photo. A black and white portrait of Caroline Mercer holding a toddler. Except that wasn't Caroline. It was Ruth, her mother, 20 years younger, smiling that same soft smile. The mug slipped from Nora's hand and shattered on the floor. She grabbed the remote, turned up the volume. The anchor continued. Mercer describes the foundation as a tribute to his late wife and their family's enduring legacy of compassion. Nora's heart pounded. That wasn't a legacy. That was theft. She stormed into the bedroom, the sound waking Ruth. "Mom," Nora said breathlessly, "you need to see this." Ruth blinked, groggy. "What's wrong?" Nora pointed to the TV. "He used your photo, the one with me. He's passing it off as his wife and kid." Ruth stared, then paled. "Oh my God," she whispered. "He didn't." "Oh, he did. He's using you, using us, for his perfect little redemption story." Ruth's voice cracked. "That picture was mine. I had one copy left. He must have..." She trailed off, tears filling her eyes. "He must have kept it all these years." "Yeah, well, now it's on national television. He's rewriting everything. He's making you the ghost of his perfect wife." Ruth covered her face. "I told you he was dangerous, Nora. Not because he hits or yells, but because he lies so beautifully. You start to believe it." Nora's anger burned hotter. "He doesn't get to erase you. Not again." "Nora, please don't go near him." "I'm not asking," Nora said, already grabbing her coat. "I'm done letting him control the story." "Nora, stop!" Ruth's voice rose, thin and desperate. "He has money, lawyers, power. I don't care. He doesn't get to take our faces and turn them into props for his guilt." Ruth's breathing quickened, panic flashing in her eyes. "You don't understand. The Mercers, when they want something gone, it disappears." Nora paused in the doorway, meeting her mother's gaze. "Then let's see what happens when they try to disappear the truth." She slammed the door before Ruth could answer. Outside, the city was loud and cold, the kind of grey morning that made everything feel urgent. Nora pulled out her phone and scrolled through the Mercer Foundation's website. There it was again, her mother's face smiling beneath the words, "In memory of Caroline Mercer." She took a screenshot, then another. Then she started typing a message to Ethan. "We need to talk. He's lying about everything." She hit send before she could change her mind. And somewhere deep inside her, a new kind of resolve took root. Not the hunger for answers, but the will to make them impossible to ignore. The next afternoon, Nora waited at the same park across from Westwood Avenue. The air was sharp with the smell of rain, and the wind whipped through the trees like it had something to say. She kept checking her phone, watching the message thread with Ethan. "We need to talk. He's lying about everything." No reply. She was about to give up when a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. Ethan stepped out, his expression tense, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. He wasn't wearing the easy smirk she'd seen before. "You picked a bold hill to die on," he said quietly as he approached. "I'm not dying on anything," Nora shot back. "But your father's lying to the world. He's using my mum's photo, our photo, as some kind of PR stunt." Ethan crossed his arms. "I saw it too. I didn't believe it at first, but... yeah, that's not my mother. So why aren't you doing anything?" "Because," he said, leaning in. The last time someone went up against Daniel Mercer, they didn't just lose, they disappeared. You think I can just stand on a podium and call him a fraud? He's not just a fraud, Nora said, her voice breaking. He's a thief. That's my mother's face he's showing to the world. That's me in her arms. Ethan exhaled, pulling off his sunglasses. His eyes were raw, sleepless. You think I don't get it? I grew up worshipping that man. Now every word he says feels like poison. Then help me expose him. He looked away, hands shoved into his pockets. Even if we had proof, no one would listen. He controls everything. The board, the press, the damn police chief. I have proof, Nora said. She pulled her phone from her coat, opened the screenshots, and handed it to him. The photo's been edited. Look, see the edges? They blurred my mom's hair to make it look like someone else's. But it's her. That's me. Ethan studied the screen, his brow furrowed. Jesus. You're right. Nora's heart raced. So what do we do? He hesitated. There's a charity event this weekend. The Foundation's official launch. All the big press outlets will be there. If you're serious about this, that's where you hit him. Let me guess, Nora said. You want me to just crash it? Not alone. Ethan's voice dropped. I'll get you in, but you have to promise me something. What? No matter what happens, don't trust anyone with the Mercer name, including me. Nora frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Ethan gave a small, bitter smile. Let's just say I learned something last night. Something I wish I hadn't. He pulled a small envelope from his jacket and handed it to her. Inside was an old newspaper clipping, dated 20 years ago. The headline read, Heiress Caroline Mercer suffers miscarriage. Family requests privacy. Nora's stomach dropped. Miscarriage? Yeah, Ethan said grimly. Except she didn't. Caroline couldn't have kids. She and Dad were falling apart. And then, suddenly, a baby appeared in the picture. Her hands trembled as she pieced it together. He used me. He used us to cover his wife's lie. Ethan nodded slowly. You were never supposed to exist, Nora. But when you did, he turned you into proof that his perfect life wasn't falling apart. The world tilted. The anger, the confusion, it all blurred into one sharp, burning purpose. Nora looked up, her voice steady now. Then I'm done hiding. He took our story. I'm taking it back. Ethan's eyes darkened. Then get ready. Because once you start this, there's no going back. And as thunder rolled in the distance, Nora realized she wasn't just chasing the truth anymore. She was walking straight into war. Saturday night arrived with a storm that felt almost biblical. Thunder rolled over Ridgefield as luxury cars lined up in front of the Mercer Foundation gala. Flashbulbs burst like fireworks while reporters shouted Daniel Mercer's name. From the outside, it looked perfect. Power, legacy, redemption. Inside all the air smelled of money and lies. Nora stood in the service corridor again, wearing the same black dress from the hotel dinner, her ID badge forged by Ethan. She could feel her pulse in her throat. Every part of her screamed to turn around and run. But it was too late for that. Ethan met her near the ballroom entrance, his jaw tight. Security's on high alert tonight. If you get caught— I won't, she interrupted. You said there's something I need to see. What is it? He hesitated, then motioned for her to follow. They slipped down a side hall, lined with framed photographs, Mercer family milestones, magazine covers, awards. At the end of the corridor hung a massive portrait. Daniel Mercer stood in the center, one hand on the shoulder of a young woman with auburn hair, another resting on a baby's back. The caption read, The Mercer Legacy, 2001. Nora's heart stopped. It was her mother. Ruth's face, untouched, unedited, smiled up from the frame. And the baby she held, wrapped in a yellow blanket, was Nora. Nora staggered closer, her reflection trembling in the glass. This has been hanging here all these years." Ethan nodded grimly. "Yeah. My mother's friends used to whisper about it. Said it was the only photo your dad refused to replace. He told everyone it was my mom and me." She touched the glass, her fingers cold. "He built his whole empire around a lie." Ethan's voice softened. "He built it around guilt." A voice behind them said, "You shouldn't be here." They turned. Daniel Mercer stood in the doorway, tuxedo immaculate, eyes like storm clouds. The chatter of the gala echoed faintly behind him, but here in the hall it was silent, like the world had stopped waiting for his command. Nora squared her shoulders. "So this is how you honor people? You steal their faces and call it legacy?" Daniel's expression didn't change, but a vein pulsed at his temple. "I didn't steal anything. I preserved what was lost." "You preserved a lie," she snapped. "You used my mother to protect your reputation. You used me." Ethan stepped forward. "Dad, stop pretending. She deserves the truth." Daniel's voice sharpened. "You think this is truth? You think the world wants the truth? They want heroes, Ethan. They want men who rise from tragedy, not men who admit they destroyed it." Nora's voice trembled, but her eyes stayed locked on him. "You destroyed her. She spent her whole life running from you." Daniel's facade cracked just slightly. "Because I failed her. Because I failed both of you. And now I'm trying to make it right." Ethan scoffed. "By erasing her name." Daniel's tone hardened again. "You wouldn't understand what it means to protect something bigger than yourself." Nora shook her head slowly. "You don't protect legacies, Daniel. You bury them." He took a step closer. "You have no idea the damage you're doing." "Maybe not," she said, "but I'm done letting you write my story for me." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Then I hope you're ready to live with the consequences." Ethan moved between them. "If you touch her, I'll tell every journalist in that room what's hanging on this wall." Daniel's eyes flicked toward the portrait, the mask of control slipping completely for the first time. And in that flicker of panic, Nora knew. He wasn't afraid of her. He was afraid of the truth finally seeing daylight. Daniel closed the distance between them, his voice low but trembling. "You don't know what you're playing with, Nora. That portrait isn't just a lie. It's a shield. The truth behind it could ruin everything this family built." Nora didn't move. "Then maybe it deserves to fall." Ethan's glare cut through the air. "Dad, for once in your life, stop hiding behind the Mercer name and tell us the truth. Who forced you to do this? Grandfather?" Daniel's expression flickered, a shadow crossing his features. "It started with him, yes. But it didn't end there." He turned toward the portrait, staring at Ruth's face as though seeing it for the first time. "When your grandfather found out about Ruth, he saw it as a threat. He thought I was jeopardizing the family's future, the company's reputation. He told me I had two options: end it quietly or lose everything." Nora's throat tightened. "And you picked yourself." Daniel flinched at the words. "I tried to protect her. I paid off her debts, arranged housing, sent money every month. But she wouldn't take it. She vanished before I could find her again." "Because she was terrified of you," Nora said. "She said you tried to make her get rid of me." Daniel's head snapped up, eyes wide. "That's not true. I would never." He stopped, realizing how hollow it sounded. "At least, not at first. I was scared, reckless. I said things I didn't mean. But I wanted to fix it." Ethan's voice hardened. "You didn't fix anything. You replaced her." Daniel turned toward his son. "Your mother, Caroline, knew about Ruth. She agreed to help me on one condition." "What condition?" Nora asked. "That no one would ever know the truth about you. She couldn't have children, and she refused to let our marriage fall apart. So when your photo, our photo, surfaced, she demanded it be buried under her name. The story was rewritten, and the press ate it up." Nora's voice broke. "So you let her erase us. You let her pretend my mother's child was hers. I thought I could make it right later, he said weakly. After the scandal passed, after my father died, after you built an empire, Ethan cut in, disgust dripping from his tone. Daniel's hands shook as he spoke. Do you think I don't see her face every day? Every time I walked into this house, every time I passed that portrait, I remembered the woman I destroyed. You think this money, this legacy, makes it easier? It doesn't. Nora felt anger and pity fighting inside her. You could have told the truth at any time. You could have given my mum her name back. I tried, he whispered, but Ruth wouldn't let me. When I found her years later, she told me if I ever went near you, she'd disappear again. She said you deserved a life without my shadow over it. Ethan crossed his arms. And now you're parading her photo on national TV as some twisted memorial. That's not remorse, Dad. That's control. Daniel's shoulders sagged, the fight leaving him. You think I wanted this? That photo, her smile, was the only piece of her I had left. I couldn't let it fade. Nora stepped closer, her voice steady but cold. You didn't preserve her memory. You imprisoned it. For a long moment, no one spoke. The storm outside rattled the windows, the thunder echoing through the hall. Ethan turned to Nora. We should go. Let him live with his ghosts. Daniel reached out, his voice barely a whisper. Nora, please, don't walk away. I can still make it right. She looked back at him, her eyes wet but unyielding. You can't fix something that was never yours to keep. And as she walked out of the Mercer estate, Daniel's voice cracked behind her, a sound of a man finally realizing that his empire had been built on someone else's heartbreak. Nora didn't remember the drive home. She just remembered rain. Endless, hammering rain that blurred everything, lights, streets, thoughts. Her mother's apartment glowed faintly through the downpour when she arrived, but something about it felt wrong. Too still, too quiet. She pushed the door open. Mom? The only answer was the rhythmic hiss of the oxygen machine. Ruth was slumped against the couch cushions, pale and motionless, her thin fingers still clutching a folded blanket. Mom! Nora dropped to her knees beside her. Her hands shook as she checked for a pulse. There, but weak. She grabbed the phone, dialing 911, her voice breaking as she gave the address. Minutes later, paramedics filled the room, their calm urgency a cruel contrast to her panic. She stood frozen as they lifted Ruth onto a stretcher, the oxygen tube trailing like a lifeline behind them. At the hospital, the fluorescent lights felt colder than ever. Machines beeped, nurses whispered. Nora sat in the hallway, arms wrapped around herself, the smell of antiseptic burning her eyes. A doctor finally appeared. She's stable, he said gently, but her heart's weak. You should prepare yourself. It could be hours, or days. Nora nodded numbly. Can I see her? He led her to a small room where Ruth lay surrounded by wires and quiet. Her mother's eyelids fluttered as Nora took her hand. Hey, Nora whispered, forcing a smile. You scared me. Ruth's voice came out fragile, like glass. Guess I still know how to make an entrance. Don't joke like that, Nora said, her throat tight. Please. Ruth opened her eyes fully. You saw him again, didn't you? Yes. And? He told me everything. About you, about the lie, about the portrait. Nora paused, tears burning. Why didn't you tell me sooner, Mum? I spent half my life hating the wrong person. Ruth sighed, her breath shallow. Because I wanted to protect you from the truth and from what it would turn you into. What's that supposed to mean? She smiled faintly. You're so much like him. The fire, the temper. I didn't want you chasing ghosts. I'm not chasing ghosts, Nora whispered. I'm chasing justice. Justice, Ruth repeated softly. Sweetheart, the Mercers don't lose. They erase. I don't care, Nora said, squeezing her hand. I'm not afraid of them. Ruth's eyes filled with tears. You should be. He's powerful, yes, but not just in money. He knows how to twist truth until it sounds like mercy. Don't let him pull you back in. I won't, Nora promised. I'll make sure everyone knows who you are. Not his wife. My mother. The woman he couldn't destroy. Ruth's breathing hitched. Promise me something, Nora. Anything. When I'm gone, don't let your anger be the only thing keeping you alive. Tell the world the truth, but don't let it become your whole story. You deserve more than revenge. Nora nodded, tears spilling freely now. I promise. Ruth smiled faintly. That's my girl. A long silence fell. Then Ruth's grip on Nora's hand loosened, her chest rising one last time, before going still. The monitors shrieked, nurses rushed in. Nora stumbled back as they tried to revive her, but deep down, she already knew. The woman who had been her home, her shield, her whole world, was gone. When the room finally went quiet again, Nora walked to the bedside and pressed her forehead to her mother's hand. You kept me safe, she whispered. Now it's my turn. And in that moment, as dawn began to break outside the hospital window, Nora Lane stopped being the daughter of secrets and became the keeper of truth. The funeral was small. Rain fell like it had been waiting for the right day to finally open up. A few neighbors came, the nurse from the clinic, and Nora stood at the graveside holding an umbrella that shook in her hand. The wind kept trying to close it, but she didn't let it. When it was over, she stayed long after everyone else left. She traced her fingers along her mother's name carved into the stone. Ruth Lane, beloved mother, fierce heart. Rest now, Mom, she whispered. I'll finish what you started. That night, the apartment felt too big, too quiet. The smell of her mother's tea still lingered in the kitchen. Nora sat on the couch with the wallet, his wallet, resting on her lap. She hadn't looked inside it since the night she found it, afraid of what else it might hold. But now, she needed to know. She opened it slowly. The photo was still there. Her mother and her as a baby, both smiling like the future would be kind. Beneath the photo she felt a seam, something loose. She tugged at the lining until a folded piece of paper slid out. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. The paper was old, yellowed, edges soft from time. It wasn't typed. It was written in ink, the handwriting neat and deliberate. It began simply. Ruth, if you're reading this, it means I failed you. Again. I've spent years trying to undo what my father did, what I allowed him to do. I know I can't fix it, but I want you to know. I never stopped looking for you. For her. For Nora. Nora froze. Her own name. I left this in my wallet because I couldn't bear to lose you twice. If someday our daughter finds it, tell her she was never forgotten. Tell her she was my reason for everything I built. Even the lies. The rest of the page was smudged from water or tears, the ink bleeding like the words themselves couldn't stay contained. But the last line was still clear. My heart will find its way home. Nora pressed the letter to her chest, sobbing quietly. For the first time, she felt the weight of both their truths, her mother's pain, his guilt. Two people trapped by choices that neither of them could undo. She whispered through her tears, "Why couldn't you just tell the truth when it mattered?" Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from Ethan. "I'm sorry about your mum. I saw the notice. Are you okay?" She stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back. "No. But I will be. I found something. We need to meet." He replied almost instantly. "Tomorrow. Noon. The pier." Nora looked around the empty apartment, the silence pressing in. She packed her mother's photo, the letter, and the wallet into a small box. Then she slipped her mother's ring onto her finger, the one Ruth always said was for later. The rain had stopped outside. Streetlights shimmered across the puddles as Nora stepped onto the porch. The world felt heavy, but for the first time, her steps didn't. The next morning, she woke before sunrise. The sky was pale gold, quiet. She held the letter one last time before tucking it carefully into her bag. Her mother had lived and died, protecting her. Daniel had spent his life hiding the truth. Now both of them were gone in their own ways, and only she was left to carry what was real. She whispered into the still air, "You both loved me, in broken ways. But I'm the one who's going to fix it." And as the sun rose over Brookville, Nora Lane walked out of her mother's apartment for the last time, heading toward the pier and toward the reckoning that waited for her there. The wind at the pier carried the smell of salt and rust. Seagulls screamed overhead as Nora stood at the edge of the dock, clutching her coat against the cold. The letter and wallet were tucked safely in her bag. She didn't know what she expected from Ethan. An ally, maybe. Or just someone who understood what it felt like to live under Daniel Mercer's shadow. Ethan arrived late, as usual, hands in his pockets, sunglasses hiding his eyes even though the sky was grey. "Hey," he said quietly. "You look tired." "I buried my mum 3 days ago," Nora said flatly. "So yeah, a little." He nodded, guilt flickering across his face. "I'm sorry. I really am." Nora didn't want pity. "You said you had something to tell me." "What is it?" Ethan hesitated, glancing toward the water. "After the gala, my dad went nuclear. He's got lawyers digging into your life, where you work, who you talk to. He thinks you're planning to go public." "I am," she said. "I'm done being his secret." "Then you should know," Ethan said, lowering his voice. "He's already getting ahead of it. He called a press conference for tomorrow. He's going to reveal that the woman in that photo is your mum, his old family friend. He's spinning it like some noble act of remembrance." Nora's jaw tightened. "He's turning my mother's life into another PR stunt." Ethan sighed. "That's how he survives. He controls the story before anyone else can." She pulled the letter from her bag, holding it out to him. "Not this time. I have proof. His handwriting. His confession." Ethan took the paper carefully, eyes scanning the faded ink. "This could destroy him." "That's the idea," Nora said. "I want people to see what he did." "To her." "To me." He folded the letter slowly, slipping it into his jacket. "You'll get your chance, but we need to be smart about this. Let me talk to a reporter I trust." Nora frowned. "You sure you can trust them?" He gave her a sad smile. "I don't trust anyone, but this one owes me." She studied his face. He looked sincere, tired, maybe even scared. "Okay," she said finally. "But I want that letter back." "You'll have it tomorrow," Ethan promised. "I'll call you once it's safe." He turned to leave, pausing at the end of the dock. "Be careful, Nora. When people like my dad start losing control, they don't fall quietly." As he disappeared into the mist, Nora exhaled, unsure if she'd done the right thing. For the first time since finding the wallet, she'd handed her truth to someone else. That night, she couldn't sleep. She replayed every word, every look. Something about the way Ethan had held the letter. It didn't feel like protection. It felt like possession. The next morning, her fears were confirmed. The TV blared with breaking news. "Billionaire Daniel Mercer addresses rumors of hidden family." Nora froze. On screen, Daniel stood at a podium, looking solemn and heroic. "Yes," he said, voice calm and rehearsed. "I once loved a woman named Ruth Lane. She was a dear friend. Her recent passing has deeply affected me. Out of respect for her memory, I have chosen to support a new scholarship fund in her name." Behind him, a photo appeared. The same photo, but altered. Her mother's face blurred slightly. The baby's features softened. The caption read, "Private archive, courtesy of the Mercer family." Nora's heart stopped. And then, as the camera panned out, she saw who stood beside Daniel. Ethan. He smiled for the press. Nora's breath hitched. He wasn't an ally. He was Mercer's son, after all. And as the cameras flashed, Nora realized the letter she'd trusted him with was now in the hands of the man who'd taken everything from her family. Twice, Nora couldn't move. The news broadcast flickered across her small living room, every word a knife twisting deeper. Daniel Mercer's voice dripped with sincerity as he spoke of redemption, of honoring the past. And standing beside him, Ethan, calm, polished, complicit. The letter was gone. The only proof she had was now evidence rewritten in Daniel's favor. Her mother's story, stolen again. Nora whispered into the empty room, "You liar!" Then louder, "You both lied to me." Her phone buzzed, a message from Ethan. "I had to do it. You don't understand. Stay away from the press. It's safer this way." Safer for who? She thought bitterly. For the man who had rewritten her life twice over? For the son who was too afraid to stand against him? Rage replaced grief. She opened her laptop, searching for any trace of the press conference online. It was already trending. #Mercer, legacy, #second chances. Thousands of comments praising Daniel for his honesty, his heart. Nora's reflection stared back from the dark screen, her face pale and determined. "Fine," she whispered. "If they want the truth, I'll give it to them myself." She typed furiously. Emails to reporters, a post drafted for social media, the scanned copy of the original photo she'd saved months ago. She wrote the story from the beginning. The forgotten wallet, the photo, her mother's life. She added one line at the end. "You can buy slunts, but you can't bury the truth forever." Her finger hovered over the post button. Then, knock, knock. Her blood ran cold. She peeked through the peephole. 2 men in suits stood outside. One held a badge. "Nora Lane?" the taller one called. "We'd like to ask a few questions regarding a theft from Mr. Daniel Mercer's property." Theft. Of course. Ethan hadn't just betrayed her. He'd set her up. Nora grabbed her phone, shoving it into her pocket. The window was barely wide enough to fit through, but she forced it open, climbing down the fire escape as the door handle rattled behind her. Rain had started again, steady and cold. She ran, feet splashing through puddles, heart hammering. When she reached the corner cafe, she ducked inside, dripping and breathless. The barista looked up. "Rough night?" "You could say that," Nora panted. She took a seat by the window, trying to steady her breathing. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone. The post she'd written was still open, cursor blinking like it was waiting for courage. She hit post. Within minutes, the notifications exploded. Her story spread faster than she imagined. Comment after comment poured in, some sympathetic, some skeptical, all watching. The world had finally seen her mother's face next to Daniel Mercer's. But before relief could settle in, her screen flashed with a new notification, a live broadcast alert. Daniel Mercer again, flanked by Ethan. His expression wasn't calm this time. It was controlled fury. "This woman," he said, holding up a photo of Nora, "has been attempting to blackmail my family with fabricated stories and forged documents. We are cooperating with authorities to ensure justice is served." Nora felt the blood drain from her face. The barista turned up the volume. "Isn't that the billionaire guy?" She nodded numbly, her throat dry. Daniel continued, voice sharp now. "We have reason to believe she stole personal items from my residence, including a private letter. These attacks on my family will not stand." Her hands shook as she whispered, "He's turning me into the villain." The barista frowned. "Hey, are you okay?" Nora's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. One message. "I can help you. Meet me tonight." 10 p.m. Gilded Sparrow. Her old diner. And as the screen dimmed, Nora realized if the Mercers were rewriting the story again, she was about to write the final chapter herself. The Gilded Sparrow hadn't changed. Same flickering neon sign, same smell of coffee and burnt toast. Same faint jazz leaking from the speakers. But tonight, the place that once felt ordinary now felt like a stage. The last time Nora had stood here, she was invisible. Now, she was the headline villain in Daniel Mercer's redemption story. It was nearly 10 p.m. when the door opened. A tall woman in a trench coat stepped in, her silver hair tied back, eyes sharp and knowing. "Nora Lane?" "Yes," Nora said warily. The woman flashed a press badge. "Claire Donovan, The Chronicle. You posted something that's blowing up the internet. I'm the one who called you." Nora studied her. "Why should I trust you? Everyone else has sold me out." Claire sat down, ordering coffee without asking. "Because I've been trying to take down Daniel Mercer for years, and because your story finally gave me the thread I needed." Nora hesitated, then pulled the letter from her bag, the second copy she'd made before giving Ethan the original. "This is what he's scared of," she said. "His own words. Proof he lied." Claire unfolded it, reading silently. Her eyes widened. He admitted everything. The affair, the threats, the cover-up. My God, he even names his father. Nora nodded. "He's been hiding behind that foundation, pretending to be the savior when he's just cleaning his conscience." Claire looked up, her expression fierce. "Tomorrow night, there's a banquet, Mercer's official launch for the foundation. Live streamed. If you want justice, that's where you do it. On his stage." "Justice?" Nora gave a bitter laugh. "That man has lawyers, security, and half the city in his pocket. I have a piece of paper and a nightmare." "Then use it," Claire said. "Use his platform. Expose him in front of everyone watching." Nora stared at the cup of coffee between her hands. Her reflection wavered on the surface. Tired, furious, but steady. "If I do this, he'll come after me. He'll crush me." Claire's voice softened. "Maybe. But the truth's the one thing he can't erase. Once it's out, it belongs to everyone." Nora folded the letter and tucked it back into her bag. "Then I guess I'm done hiding." As they left the diner, headlights swept across the street. A black SUV idled by the curb. Its windows were tinted, but she didn't need to see inside to know who it belonged to. Mercer's men. Claire noticed too. "You still sure about this?" "Yeah," Nora said, tightening her grip on the bag. "If he wants a show, I'll give him one." The next evening, the Ridgeview Hotel glittered under spotlights. Cameras flashed as Daniel Mercer took the stage, his voice echoing through the ballroom. "We are here tonight not to look backward," he said smoothly, "but to honor the future, our foundation for hope." "Sorko." Nora stood near the entrance, her black coat pulled tight, Claire by her side. The letter burned in her pocket like a live wire. Claire whispered, "When I cue you, step up to the mic. Speak fast. Speak true." Nora nodded, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Daniel continued, "This foundation was born from love. From lies," Nora's voice rang out. The room froze. Heads turned. Cameras swung toward her. Daniel's face drained of color. "Miss Lane," he said through gritted teeth, "you're not welcome here." Nora walked to the stage, every step deliberate. "No," she said, pulling out the letter. "But your truth is—" The crowd murmured as she unfolded it under the bright lights. "This," she said, holding it up, "is Daniel Mercer's confession. His empire was built on a woman he betrayed and a daughter he buried in silence." The reporters erupted. Flashes blinded. And as Daniel lunged forward to stop her, Nora realized that for the first time in her life, he was the one afraid to be seen. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed like lightning, and Daniel Mercer's carefully crafted Empress of Grace began to tremble beneath his feet. "Security!" Daniel barked, his voice slicing through the noise. Two men in black suits moved toward Nora, but Claire Donovan stepped between them, holding up her press badge. "Touch her, and every outlet in this room will run this story before you can blink." The guards hesitated. The cameras kept rolling. Nora's hands shook as she held up the letter. "You wanted redemption, Daniel," she shouted. Here it is, your own words. You destroyed my mother's life and used her face to build your brand of compassion. Daniel's mask slipped. That letter means nothing, he said, voice cracking with anger. Fabrications from a bitter woman. Claire snapped back. Then explain why the handwriting matches your financial statements from 2001. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Daniel's face went pale. Ethan stood off to the side, frozen. His eyes darted from his father to Nora. He looked like a man watching a train wreck he'd set in motion and didn't know how to stop. Dad, he began, but Daniel cut him off. You don't know what she's capable of. She's trying to ruin us. Nora's voice rose above the clamor. Steady now. You ruined yourself. My mother ran because you tried to control her. You called it love, but it was fear. You let your father buy her silence. Then you spent the rest of your life pretending she was your sainted wife. You want to talk legacy? This is it. She dropped the letter onto the podium in front of him. The microphones picked up the soft slap of paper on metal, like a gavel striking judgment. Daniel's lips trembled. You think you know the whole story? You don't. I loved her. You loved what she gave you, a second chance at perfection, Nora said. But real love doesn't erase people. It remembers them. The crowd was still, every reporter hanging on the exchange. Ethan finally stepped forward, voice low but clear. She's right, Dad. You lied to everyone. You lied to me. Daniel turned, eyes wild. I did it for you. No, Ethan said. You did it for you. The room broke into whispers. Flashes blinded the stage. Daniel's empire was unraveling in real time, and the one person he'd spent decades trying to hide stood in front of him, illuminated by truth. For the first time, Daniel looked small, just a man, stripped of power, shaking under the weight of what he'd done. Nora, he said, almost pleading, I can make this right. I'll admit everything. Just give me the letter. She stared at him, the crowd waiting for her answer. You don't get to own this story anymore, she said quietly. It's not yours to fix. She turned toward the cameras. My mother's name was Ruth Lane. She was not a footnote in a billionaire's life. She was a mother, a fighter, and she deserved better than to be forgotten. The audience erupted. Flashes, questions, applause, chaos. Daniel staggered back, pale, defeated. His security team moved to pull him from the stage as reporters swarmed. Ethan caught Nora's arm as she stepped down. I didn't know he'd go this far, he said, voice cracking. Nora looked at him, tears forming but her tone firm. You had the chance to stop him, Ethan. But now the world will. He nodded, guilt written across his face. I'll testify. I'll tell the truth this time. She didn't reply. The sound of sirens wailed faintly outside, the first ripple of consequences finally coming for the Mercer Empire. As she walked out into the night, rain started to fall again, soft and cold. And for the first time since she found that old wallet, Nora felt the weight of her mother's story lift. Not erased, not rewritten, but finally, truly seen. By the next morning, the world had changed. Nora's name was everywhere. News feeds, podcasts, TV panels. The waitress who brought down a billionaire. Her phone buzzed non-stop, reporters begging for interviews, strangers sending messages of support or skepticism. She ignored them all. She sat on the small balcony of her apartment, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sunrise melt through the rain. For once, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Claire's text arrived at 7:14 a.m. He's finished. The board suspended him. SEC opened an inquiry. The letter's gone viral. You did it. Nora exhaled, the words almost unreal. She'd done it. The empire built on her mother's stolen face was finally crumbling. But the victory didn't feel sweet. It felt hollow. She thought of Ruth's warning, her voice trembling in that hospital bed. Don't let anger be the only thing keeping you alive. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. A voicemail this time. She pressed play. Nora, Daniel's voice rasped through the speaker. They took everything. The company, the house. Ethan won't answer my calls. I'm sorry. I know you have no reason to believe me, but I loved your mother. I loved you. I just didn't know how. Please, come to Ridgefield. I need to see you. One last time. Nora stared at the phone. Every instinct screamed to delete it, to walk away and never look back. But something in his tone, the crack, the rawness, made her pause. By noon, she was on the train. The Mercer estate looked nothing like it had before. Reporters stood outside the gates. Cameras flashed as she passed, heads turning. Nora Lane! Any comment? She kept walking. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. The portraits were gone from the walls, the shelves stripped bare. Only one thing remained, the giant portrait of Ruth and baby Nora, hanging crookedly over the fireplace. Daniel sat beneath it, his suit wrinkled, his eyes sunken. The once golden titan now looked like a man whose soul had been turned inside out. I didn't think you'd come, he said softly. I almost didn't, she admitted. He nodded, staring at the floor. You did what I never could. You told the truth. Nora stood across from him, her arms crossed. The truth cost my mother everything. The least I could do was make it mean something. He winced. I know. I told myself I was protecting everyone. Caroline, the company, even you. But the truth is, I was protecting myself. From shame. She looked up at the portrait. You could have protected her instead. Daniel's eyes glistened. I see that now. And it's too late. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a simple gold locket. Your mother gave me this the day before she left, said I'd know when to give it back. I think that day's finally come. Nora took it, opening the clasp. Inside was a tiny photo. Her mother smiling, younger, freer. Thank you, she said quietly. Daniel leaned back, closing his eyes. You remind me of her. Stronger, even. You should be proud of that. I am, she said, but I'm not you. I won't live in lies. He smiled faintly. Good. Don't. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The clock ticked softly in the corner, counting down a silence that felt like peace. When Nora finally turned to leave, Daniel's voice stopped her. Tell your mother I kept the promise. My heart found its way home. She didn't look back. Outside, the reporters shouted her name again, but this time she didn't flinch. She walked past them, clutching the locket to her chest. And as she reached the gates of the Mercer estate, the sun broke through the clouds, washing the last shadow of his empire away. A year passed. Seasons turned over quietly, like pages of a book finally closing. The Mercer scandal had faded from the headlines, replaced by fresher chaos, newer villains. But for Nora, life was no longer about chasing noise. It was about building peace. She stood behind the counter of Ruth's table, the small diner she'd reopened in Brookville, the same one where she once scrubbed tables and found a forgotten wallet that changed everything. The smell of coffee filled the air, the sound of laughter spilling from the few morning regulars who had come to love her pancakes and stubborn kindness. A young waitress named Kayla darted by with a tray. Table 6 wants another round of coffee. Got it, Nora said with a grin, pouring fresh cups. And tell them the muffins are on the house today. It's our anniversary. Kayla blinked. You mean, like, of the diner? Nora nodded. Yeah. 1 year since we opened. 1 year since everything started making sense. The bell above the door jingled. A man stepped in, tall, familiar, but older. Daniel Mercer. His once polished presence was gone. He wore a simple jacket, his hair streaked with grey. The diner fell silent for a beat. Kayla whispered, Is that who I think it is? Yeah, Nora said softly. It's okay. Daniel approached the counter, hesitant. You're hard to find, Nora. Maybe that's the point, she said. He nodded, his eyes scanning the walls. They were covered in photos, old ones of Ruth, new ones of the community Nora had built. Volunteers, families, customers. It was a gallery of real stories, not borrowed ones. You did this, he said quietly. She'd be proud. Nora studied him for a moment. You look different. I am, he said. The foundation's gone. The company too. I sold what was left and started something smaller. Real housing projects this time. No cameras, no press. She raised an eyebrow. Trying to make up for everything? He smiled sadly. Trying to do it right for once. Nora poured him a cup of coffee. You'll have to pay. Everyone does. Daniel chuckled. Fair enough. He took a sip, wincing at the heat. You even make it strong like your mother used to. At the mention of Ruth, Nora's expression softened. She would have liked to see this place. I think she can, he said, every time someone walks through that door. For a moment, silence filled the space, peaceful, not heavy. Two people connected not by blood or guilt anymore, but by understanding. Daniel set the empty cup down. You know, I drove past the old estate last week. They're turning it into a public park. Fitting, I guess. Something beautiful out of a house full of lies. That's what rebuilding is, Nora said. Turning pain into something useful. He nodded, reaching into his coat. I brought something for you. He slid a small envelope across the counter. Inside was a check, not extravagant, but enough. For your scholarship fund, he said. For young women who need a start. Maybe name it after her. Nora stared at it, speechless for a moment. This doesn't erase anything. I know, Daniel said gently. It's not meant to. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time she saw not the man who'd ruined her mother's life, but one trying, quietly, to atone. Thank you, she said. He smiled faintly, standing to leave. Take care of yourself, Nora. You deserve good things. When he stepped outside, the morning light caught him, soft and golden. Nora watched him go, then looked around her diner. Her mother's laughter echoing faintly in the clatter of dishes and the warmth of strangers eating together. She whispered, We made it, Mum. And as sunlight filled the room, the sign above the door, Ruth's table, gleamed like a promise kept, a story rewritten not in secrets, but in grace. So that's how the story ends, my friends. You're still here, aren't you? If you've stayed until this moment, maybe something in Nora's journey has touched your heart, too. Maybe it's that quiet reminder we all need, that truth, no matter how painful, always leads to peace. Nora's fight wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming her dignity, her voice, her mother's memory. You see, life doesn't promise fairness. The Stoics taught us that. Marcus Aurelius once said, You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That's exactly what Nora did. She couldn't change her past, but she could choose how to live beyond it. And so can you. Healing doesn't always come with applause or headlines. Sometimes it's found in small acts, telling the truth, forgiving what broke you, building something new from the ruins. If this story moved you, if it stirred something deep inside, don't let it fade for suyo. Share it, like it, subscribe to our channel. Because somewhere out there, someone else is waiting for a story that reminds them they're not broken. They're just becoming whole.